Oh, good morning to us, AM show on 3 Magic Talk and online. It's coming up 5 minutes away from 7. I'm Duncan Garner. Welcome along. AUT University has gone all weak at the knees and cancelled a Tiananmen Square anniversary event after Chinese government officials contacted the university to tell them not to go ahead. So what do we do? Exactly. However, AUT maintains it cancelled the booking for reasons unrelated to China's pressure. It was this thing called a booking issue. They've even given us our excuse. I'm not sure I buy it at all. So is this yet another sign that China is exerting undue influence in New Zealand? And why don't we tell them to bugger off? Joining us now is Otago University international relations expert Robert Patman. G'day, Robert. G'day. Nice to have you on the program.
Good morning, Duncan.
Looks a bit gutless. Looks a bit gutless, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, this is not the first time, of course, an education institution has used the bookings excuse. I think it was Auckland University about a year ago with regard to a critical documentary on the Confucius Institutes, the Chinese Confucius Institutes in this country. But it is interesting that China is making these sort of requests, and I think it's testimony to the fact that China, in the course of the last decade, has seen an enhanced consciousness of its military diplomatic capabilities, and perhaps it feels now it's got the right to make the sort of requests which are associated with great powers that want influence beyond their own shores.
So the thing for me is it a request or is it an order?
Well, I think a request, but it could be stroke an order, given the fact that China in the past, has not been above withdrawing students from institutions where those institutions incur their displeasure, and B, it's one of those situations where it highlights to the institution that they could stand to lose if they don't heed that request.
This creep into the Pacific has been quick, it's been startling, and it's right in our faces now, isn't it? To think even 30 or 40 years ago that the Chinese government would ring up AUT and say, hey, put that event off, please, and we do so. I mean, remarkable, really.
It is, but I think this request also shows the nervousness and the, you might say, insecurity of the Chinese authorities. Because I know that, China knows full well that countries like New Zealand have freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And I think on this particular issue, however, they do see commemorations of the Tiananmen Square as a bit of a challenge to the one-party system in China. And it's interesting Chinese diplomats have made this point, that they see such commemorations as a challenge to the legitimacy of the regime. And, just for viewers, it was 30 years ago now that huge student demonstrations occurred in Beijing, at Tiananmen Square, and something like 1 million students were on the streets. They weren't seeking to overthrow the Communist Party, but what they were seeking was to make it more accountable. And perhaps that is, a really sensitive issue at the moment.
You see, the thing is, I think there's a negative return here because we're talking about this and exposing what happened and talking about it so the Chinese students do actually get some kind of discourse on it. Had they not rung up, we might not be talking about this.
Yes, and in a sense it may be counterproductive. One thing I think is absolutely clear, though, I think New Zealand institutions, New Zealand universities have an obligation to uphold the Education Act of 1989, which is under their Act, New Zealand's Act as Critic and Conscious Society, and they mustn't row back on that commitment. It's very important that all students, international and domestic, are able to enjoy the critical exchange of views that occur in New Zealand universities traditionally. And I think, it's very important that we protect our interests and values robustly.
Lovely to have you on the program always. Otago University international relations expert Robert Patman.